"I don't care what anyone says after I'm gone," my grandmother whispered, pressing a cold brass key into my hand. "Don't open the safe until they've buried me." Then she looked toward the bedroom door, as if she expected someone to be standing there. There was no one. At least, that's what I believed. 3 days later, half of my family was accusing each other of stealing something that none of us had even seen, and I was holding the only key. Until that moment, I had never thought of my grandmother as someone capable of keeping dangerous secrets. To me, Eleanor Whitmore was simply Grandma Ellie. She baked cinnamon bread every Sunday, complained that coffee had become too expensive, and somehow managed to beat everyone at cards despite pretending she couldn't remember the rules. She lived alone in the same white farmhouse where she'd spent more than 50 years with my grandfather before he passed away. People described her as stubborn. I preferred the word independent. At 29, I visited her every weekend whenever work allowed it. I repaired loose shelves, cleaned the gutters, and listened to stories I'd already heard dozens of times. Some people would have found those afternoons boring. I never did. She had a way of making ordinary moments feel important. Looking back now, I wonder whether she already knew time was running out, because during those final months, she began watching everyone. It started with tiny things. Whenever my Uncle Richard stopped by, Grandma would quietly lock her bedroom door afterward. If Aunt Linda visited, Grandma counted the silverware after dinner. Once, while we were watching television, she suddenly muted the sound and asked me a question that felt strangely out of place. "Daniel, do you believe people are born greedy?" I laughed. "What kind of question is that?" She didn't smile. "They're not born greedy," she said softly. "They become greedy the moment they think nobody is watching." Then she changed the subject, as if she'd never spoken. I should have asked what she meant. Instead, I forgot about it, at least until much later. Her health declined faster than anyone expected. The doctors called it heart failure. She called it exhaustion. "They keep giving fancy names to getting old," she'd joke. But even while growing weaker, she refused to leave the farmhouse. "It has everything I need." Except, one afternoon I noticed she'd installed a brand new steel door in the basement. That seemed ridiculous. The basement contained nothing except old furniture, dusty boxes, and decades of forgotten memories. "What's with the new door?" I asked. "Oh, that?" she replied without looking at me. "I finally decided some things deserve better locks." Some things. Not someone. Not everything. Just some things. That answer stayed with me far longer than I wanted to admit. The day she gave me the key, rain hammered against the hospital windows. Machines beeped quietly beside her bed. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Fragile, but her eyes remained sharp, almost frightened. She waited until my mother stepped outside to speak with the nurse. Only then did Grandma motion for me to come closer. From beneath her pillow, she pulled out a tiny cloth pouch. Inside lay an old brass key, worn smooth by decades of use. Its teeth were unlike any key I'd ever seen. "Take it." I hesitated. "What is it for?" "The basement." My stomach tightened. "The new door?" She nodded. "Behind it is a wall safe." I blinked. "A safe?" "Yes." "What is inside?" She closed my fingers around the key. "If I tell you now," she stopped, "you'll make the wrong choice." "I don't understand." "You will." Her breathing grew uneven. "Promise me." "I promise." "No." She squeezed my wrist with surprising strength. "Look at me." I met her eyes. "No matter who cries. No matter who threatens. No matter who says I promised them. You wait. Until after my funeral. Then open it. Alone." I swallowed hard. "Why me?" For the first time in my life, my grandmother looked ashamed. "Because you're the only one I hope still knows the difference between love," she paused, "and ownership." Those were the last complete words she ever spoke to me. She died 2 days later. The funeral brought together relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone cried, some sincerely, others, I wasn't so sure. Grief has an odd way of revealing people's true priorities. Before the flowers had even begun to wilt, conversations shifted. What happens to the house? Did she leave a will? Who gets Grandpa's watch? Has anyone found the documents? I hated every second of it. Grandma had barely been buried, yet inheritance had somehow become more important than remembrance. Still, one thing bothered me even more. Nobody mentioned the basement, not once, which made me wonder, did nobody know about it? Or were they pretending not to know? That evening, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. You spent the most time with her. I guess. Did she tell you anything before she passed? My heart skipped. For a split second, I nearly told her about the key. Instead, nothing important. She searched my face for several uncomfortable seconds. You'd tell me if she trusted you with something, wouldn't you? The question sounded gentle, but something beneath it felt almost desperate. I would. It was my first lie to my mother, and I hated myself for it. The following morning, I returned to Grandma's farmhouse alone. Rain had stopped. The place felt unnaturally silent, as though the house itself knew she'd never walk through its halls again. Every floorboard creaked with familiar memories. Her knitting basket remained beside the fireplace. A half-finished crossword rested on the kitchen table. Reading glasses still marked the page. Everything looked frozen in time. Everything except one thing. The basement door stood slightly open. I was certain it had been locked. Very slowly, I walked downstairs. The new steel door remained shut, but muddy footprints covered the concrete floor. Fresh footprints. Someone else had already been there. The question was, how? Because the only key was still in my pocket. For several seconds, I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. The muddy footprints continued across the concrete floor. One set, not several. Whoever came down here wasn't searching randomly. They knew exactly where they were going. My hand moved slowly toward the brass key in my pocket. It suddenly felt heavier than before, because my grandmother had told me to open the safe after her death. But she never said I was the only person who would try to reach it. I followed the footprints carefully. They stopped directly in front of the steel door. The new lock had several scratches around it. Someone had tried to force it open, but they failed. Or maybe they didn't need to open it. I leaned closer. A strange smell came from the door. Not mold, not dust. Something familiar. A woman's perfume. My first thought was my mother. She had visited the house after the funeral. She had a key. She knew the basement existed. But why would she break into a locked room? Why would she hide it from me? I stepped back. The worst part wasn't that someone had been there. The worst part was realizing I already had a suspect, and I hated that it was my own family. I walked upstairs and immediately called my mother. She answered after the third ring. "Daniel?" Her voice sounded nervous. "Did you go back to Grandma's house yesterday?" A pause. A small one, but long enough. "No, why?" "I found footprints in the basement. Silence. Then, Daniel, you shouldn't be down there. My stomach tightened. How do you know I was in the basement? Another pause. I mean, the basement is dangerous. The stairs are old. That wasn't an answer. It was an escape. Mom. What? Did Grandma ever tell you about a safe? The silence that followed was different. Not confusion. Recognition. Who told you about that? I felt cold. Nobody had told me. Grandma had. Why does that matter? My mother sighed. Daniel, some things from the past should stay buried. Then she ended the call. Not goodbye, not take care. She just hung up. And suddenly I wondered, was my mother protecting me or protecting herself? That evening, my Uncle Richard arrived unexpectedly. Richard was my grandmother's oldest son, a successful businessman, always perfectly dressed, always carrying an expensive watch. Everyone in the family admired him, but Grandma never did. She respected him. There was a difference. Richard had one weakness: control. He couldn't stand not knowing something. And when he entered the farmhouse and saw me sitting at the kitchen table, he immediately knew something was wrong. You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Just tired. He walked closer. His eyes moved around the room, then stopped on my jacket. Specifically, the pocket where I kept the key. It was only for a second, but I noticed. So, he said casually, did your grandmother leave you anything? The question was too quick, too prepared. Why would you ask that? He laughed. I mean, she was closest to you. Maybe. Maybe? His smile disappeared. Daniel, your grandmother and I had disagreements, but she was still my mother. I nodded. Of course. He looked away. For a moment, I saw something unexpected. Pain. Real pain. Then it vanished. She made mistakes, he said quietly. All of us do. The sentence bothered me, because it sounded less like an opinion and more like a confession. The next morning, I decided to search Grandma's office. Not the basement. Not yet. I wanted answers first. Her office was exactly how she'd left it. Books arranged by color. Old photographs on the shelves. A small wooden box filled with handwritten recipes. Then I found something strange. Inside her desk drawer was a photograph of my grandfather. But someone had been cut out of it. Only half a person's shoulder remained. Someone had deliberately removed them. I turned the picture over. On the back, Grandma had written a date, 1987, and 3 words, she knows everything. My heart started beating faster. Who was she? And why had Grandma hidden the photo? I searched through more documents. Bills, letters, old newspapers. Then I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Daniel. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was only one sentence. If you found this before opening the safe, it means someone tried to stop you. I immediately stopped breathing, because that wasn't the only thing inside. There was another key, a smaller one, and underneath it, a name. A name I knew. My father's. My father died when I was 12. A car accident. That's what everyone told me. There was never a reason to question it, but suddenly I remembered something. My grandmother never attended the anniversary of his death, not once. When I asked why, she always said, "Some memories hurt more when people pretend they understand them." At the time, I thought it was grief. Now, I wasn't sure. I drove to my mother's house that night. I didn't knock. I just walked in after she opened the door. She immediately saw my face, and she knew. "You found something." It wasn't a question. "What happened to Dad?" Her expression changed. The tiny crack appeared, the kind of crack people show when they have spent years building a wall. "Daniel." "No," my voice shook. "I deserve the truth." She sat down. For a long time she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Your grandmother promised she would never tell you." "Tell me what?" My mother looked toward the window. "I wasn't supposed to marry your father." The room felt smaller. "What does that mean?" She wiped her eyes. "It means your grandmother knew something about your father's death." My heart stopped. "What?" Before she could answer, someone knocked on the door. Hard. 3 times. My mother looked terrified. Not surprised. Terrified. "Who is it?" No answer. Then a voice came from the other side. A voice I recognized. My Uncle Richard. "Open the door, Sarah." My mother stood up slowly. "He knows you're here." I whispered, "Why?" She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, my mother looked afraid of her own brother. "Because Richard was the last person who saw your father alive." The door handle moved. Someone was trying to open it, and suddenly the old key in my pocket no longer felt like a secret. It felt like evidence. The door handle moved again. My mother grabbed my arm. "Daniel, you need to leave." I stared at her. "Leave? Now? After everything you've hidden from me?" Her eyes filled with tears. Not the kind people show when they are angry. The kind they show when they realize they can no longer protect someone from the truth. "Please." Another knock. Stronger this time. Richard's voice came through the door. "Sarah, I know he's inside." My mother closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked exactly like my grandmother had looked in that hospital room. Afraid, but determined. "Your grandmother didn't give you that key because she trusted you with a secret." She looked at me. "She gave it to you because she knew the truth would destroy the wrong people." The door shook slightly, and I finally understood. My family wasn't hiding a treasure. They were hiding a disaster. My mother opened the door. Richard stood there. His perfect suit was slightly wet from the rain. His expression was calm, too calm. "Daniel." He looked at me. "I was hoping we could talk before things got complicated." I almost laughed. "Complicated?" I held up the small key. "How long were you planning to pretend?" For the first time, Richard lost control. Only for a second, but I saw it. Fear. "You don't understand what you're holding." "Then explain it." He stepped inside. "Your grandmother was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly." My mother immediately shook her head. "No." Richard looked at her. "Sarah." "No." Her voice became stronger. "Don't do this again." Those words stopped me. Again, I looked between them. What happened before? Neither answered, and sometimes silence tells you more than words. We went back to Grandma's farmhouse that night, all three of us. The place felt different with Richard there, like the walls were watching him, like the house remembered something he wanted everyone else to forget. I walked downstairs. The steel door waited. The original key opened the lock immediately. No resistance, no dramatic moment, just a quiet click. And somehow that made it worse, because my entire life had been built around this moment. Yet the truth entered my life silently. Inside the safe was not money, not jewelry, not property documents. There were only 3 things: a stack of letters, a small audio recorder, and a newspaper article. The headline made my hands go cold. Local businessman dies in vehicle accident. The businessman was my father, but below the article was something I had never seen, a handwritten note from Grandma. Daniel, if you are reading this, I failed to protect everyone. I pressed play on the recorder. For several seconds there was only static. Then, my grandmother's voice, older, tired, but clear. If you found this, it means I am gone. I looked at my mother. She covered her mouth. I wanted to tell the truth years ago, Grandma continued, but every choice had a price. A pause, then, Richard did not kill your father. I looked at my uncle. His face changed. Relief. For 1 second. Then came the next sentence. But Richard caused the accident. The room went silent. My uncle stepped backward. No! Nobody spoke. That isn't what happened. The recording continued. Your father discovered Richard had been stealing money from the family company. I looked at Richard. He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. He didn't need to. Your father planned to expose him, Grandma said. Richard begged him not to. Another pause. They argued. My fingers tightened around the recorder. That night, Richard followed him. My uncle whispered, "Stop." But the recording continued. The car crash was not planned. And that sentence changed everything. He didn't want your father dead. Richard sat down. For the first time in my life, he looked old, not powerful, not successful, just broken. He lost control, Grandma said, and after the accident he spent 30 years trying to convince himself that guilt was the same as punishment. I looked at Richard. Is it true? He didn't answer immediately. Then he nodded. One small movement, a lifetime of denial collapsing. Your father stopped the car. His voice trembled. He knew about the money. My chest tightened. What happened? Richard stared at the floor. He told me he was going to the police. And you followed him? Yes. Why? His eyes filled. Because I was afraid. That answer was almost worse than any excuse. I thought I could scare him. Richard swallowed. I thought if I showed him what would happen to the company, to the family. He stopped. I thought I could make him understand. And the crash? He closed his eyes. The road was wet. A tear fell. He lost control. Silence. Then, and I ran. That was the part nobody expected. Not a monster, not a murderer, just a man who made one terrible choice and spent decades building a life on top of it. But there was still one question. I turned to my mother. Why didn't you tell me? She looked devastated. Because I knew the truth would destroy you. You let me believe Dad died because of an accident. Because it was an accident. I shook my head. No, it was a choice. She looked away. And then she revealed something I never expected. Your grandmother knew. I know. No. She looked at me. She knew before the accident. I froze. What? My mother took a deep breath. She knew Richard was stealing money. She confronted him. She gave your father evidence. My mind raced. Then why didn't she stop everything? Because she believed people deserved a chance to fix their mistakes. She looked toward the safe. Your grandmother spent 30 years hoping Richard would confess. And he didn't. No. She wiped her tears. She waited until death because she knew she couldn't forgive him for him. I thought the story was over. I thought I finally understood why Grandma gave me the key. But there was one final letter, the one hidden underneath everything else. My name was written on the envelope. Not Daniel, but my grandson, when you are ready. Inside were only a few paragraphs and one final truth. Grandma wrote, Daniel, I need you to know something about your father. I continued reading. He knew Richard was responsible. My hands froze. What? My mother looked at me. What does it say? I couldn't speak. The letter continued. Your father had a chance to expose Richard before the accident, but he didn't. Because Richard was not only his brother, he was the man who saved his life years earlier. My heart broke. My father knew. He knew everything. And he chose mercy. The final sentence was the one that changed everything. Daniel, I did not leave you the key so you could punish someone. I left it because one day you would have to decide whether our family would be remembered for the mistake that destroyed us or the forgiveness that survived it. Months later, Richard confessed publicly. He lost everything. The company, the reputation, the respect he had spent decades protecting. But he also finally stopped running. My mother and I repaired our relationship slowly, not because the past disappeared, because we finally stopped pretending it didn't exist. The farmhouse remained in the family, and every Sunday, I still baked Grandma's cinnamon bread. It never tasted exactly like hers. Maybe that was the point. Some things cannot be replaced, only remembered. I used to think secrets destroyed families. Now, I understand something different. Sometimes, secrets don't destroy families. Sometimes, it's the fear of facing them that does. Grandma spent her whole life protecting the people she loved. But in the end, the greatest gift she gave me wasn't the key. It was the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts because it forces us to choose who we really want to become. What would you have done if you were Daniel?
Would you have exposed Richard immediately? Or would you have tried to understand why he hid the truth for 30 years? Share your opinion in the comments.